They say every empire begins with a rebellion. But what if the rebellion was against your own family? I'm Clara Monroe. And last fall, I walked out of my family's mansion in Surrey with nothing but 2 suitcases, soaked in rain and shame, after telling my father I wouldn't inherit his audit empire. Why? Because I had a dream of my own, designing and building handmade furniture that told stories of strength, resilience, and identity. My parents called it foolish, irresponsible, a phase. But I knew better. This is not a story of polite disagreement. This is the story of how standing up to family cost me everything, and how I clawed my way back to build something stronger. If you've ever been told your dream isn't practical, or felt the sting of being cast out for wanting more, stick around. What would you do if your father handed you a legacy, then tried to punish you for refusing it? The rain started just after he slammed the door. I stood outside my parents' grand Georgian home in Surrey, clutching 2 suitcases that suddenly felt heavier than my decision. My leather boots were already soaked through, and my blouse clung to my skin like a second betrayal. A cab would have been practical, but I didn't want practical. I wanted defiant. A train would do. 2 hours earlier, I had been sitting across from my father in his glass-walled home office, the one with the spotless marble desk and trophy case lined with decades of corporate awards. He poured scotch into a cut crystal glass, even though it was only noon. "Clara, let's not be dramatic. You're 24, you don't get to blow up your future because you like wood glue." That was his attempt at humor. I didn't laugh. "I'm not joining the firm," I said. "My decision's final. I'm focusing full-time on my furniture studio. I have orders, a growing following, and a hobby," he snapped, slamming the glass down hard enough to crack the coaster beneath it. "Not a career." Behind him, through the tall windows, our manicured garden blurred in a gray mist. I could feel my mother hovering just beyond the door, as she always did in times of conflict, present enough to witness, distant enough to deny involvement. "She's right outside, isn't she?" I muttered. He didn't answer. He just stood up, pacing. "You have no idea what you're walking away from. Do you think branding teakwood is going to protect you in this economy? Who's going to pay your rent, your taxes? What happens when your little customers vanish?" "My little customers include 2 London stylists and a boutique hotel in Brighton," I shot back. "And I'm not asking for your money." "Good, because you won't get it." The silence that followed was absolute. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't even look at my mother when she finally stepped into the doorway and said, too softly, "Maybe it's for the best. She needs to learn." Learn what? That independence was punishable. Within the hour, my things were packed. My old room, barely touched since university, was stripped. No farewell lunch, no gilted hug, just rain and the sharp click of the front door locking behind me. Now on the platform at Guildford Station, the wind sliced through my coat, and I clutched my sketchbook like it was a lifeline. My train to London would arrive in 12 minutes. 12 minutes to wipe the shame off my face. 12 minutes to decide if I still believed in myself without anyone left to believe in me. As the rain blurred everything around me, one thought rose above the noise. They think I'll fail. Good. Let them watch. East London smelled like ambition and old paint. That first week after Surrey, I moved into Jess's flat, well, technically her couch in Bethnal Green. Jess was an old uni friend, now a freelance food stylist with a 6th sense for expired oat milk and broken people. She didn't ask too many questions when I showed up dripping wet and broke. Just handed me a towel, a bowl of lentil curry, and said, "If you can survive your dad, you can survive Hackney Council." We laughed. But that night, lying on her lumpy couch with the draft sneaking through the cracked window, I realized how terrifyingly alone I really was. I had just enough in savings to cover 2 months of rent and basic supplies, so I poured everything into my studio, the digital one at first. My brand, Grit and Grain, had started as a side hustle during university, just hand-carved stools and nesting tables on Instagram. Now it had to become my lifeline. The first weeks blurred. Mornings began with Jess knocking over her French press and me trying to respond to customer inquiries while my laptop battery clung to 3%. I designed new product lines by hand, literally. Graphite smudges became my new manicure. By night, I wrapped pieces in recycled paper, double-checked shipping labels, and begged my unreliable courier not to accidentally deliver a walnut bench to Wales again. The kitchen doubled as our shipping zone. The living room became my photography set. We stacked dining chairs over the radiator to dry stain faster. My toolbox lived under Jess's bed. I once caught her folding socks next to a jigsaw blade and a can of Danish oil. "This isn't a flat anymore," she said one night, sipping cheap wine from a chipped mug. "It's a workshop with snacks." Still, I was obsessed. There was no other option. Website bugs made me cry. When Shopify crashed during a sale, I screamed into a tea towel. A table leg cracked in transit, and I spent 6 hours crying, sanding, re-gluing, repainting, and overnighting a replacement I couldn't afford. My hands blistered. My back ached. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with a customer asking if I could make a headboard in the shape of a fox. No. Through it all, Jess watched me, not with pity but with concern. "You know," she said one morning, "you haven't left the flat in 4 days. I'm working. You haven't eaten anything that wasn't toast in 4 days." I looked down at my plate, more toast. "I'm fine," I said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Orders were trickling in. Followers on Instagram were climbing. I had a tiny feature on a craft blog. I even got a message from someone claiming to work at a home decor magazine, but I was too afraid to answer. Every tiny win felt like proof that I hadn't made the biggest mistake of my life. But every mistake, missed package, unclicked email, design flaw, felt like confirmation that my father had been right. "You'll come back," he'd said, "when the fantasy dries up." That phrase lived in my skull, echoing at 2 a.m. while I redesigned a coffee table after a reviewer called it wobbly chic. I told myself this wasn't about revenge, that it wasn't about proving anything to my family. But every time I saw their name light up on my phone and let it ring out, I knew better. They wanted me to come crawling back. Instead, I stayed crawling forward. Sometimes I wondered how long I could keep it up, living on caffeine, validation, and half-finished dreams. But other times, like when a stranger sent a photo of her child coloring at one of my desks, smiling, I felt invincible. "Look," Jess said one night, scrolling through Instagram. "That big lifestyle blogger, the one who lives in Notting Hill with all the pink lamps, she just liked your chair post." I blinked. "Are you serious?" Deadly. Hope bloomed in my chest, a fragile thing. Splintered, uneven, but alive. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't need my father's firm. Maybe I could build my own. The day I opened my pop-up showroom in Shoreditch, the sun actually showed up too. It was a miracle, or a sign, or just a rare, dry Saturday in London. The space was tiny, more converted garage than gallery, but it smelled like cedar oil and promise. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights hand-finishing every piece. A bench carved from salvaged railway oak, a round dining table with a marquetry edge, and a set of curved stools I nearly gave up on after snapping the 3rd mold. Jess stood beside me as I adjusted price tags and nervously aligned business cards. "You built a brand from sawdust and spite," she whispered. "Be proud." I laughed, but inside I was nauseous. What if no one showed up? But they did, in waves. By noon, the showroom was packed. People lingered, snapped photos, asked questions. Someone recognized me from Instagram and called me that grain girl. A local art blogger asked for an interview. An influencer with 800,000 followers said my bar stools gave mid-century chic meets trauma healing, which I think was a compliment. When I finally took a breath, I realized something staggering. I was selling out. Literally. Orders tripled overnight. My phone buzzed like it was possessed. And somewhere inside all that excitement, I felt hollow. Because the moment I stepped outside, when the door closed and the crowd noise faded, I reached instinctively for my phone. For their names. My mother hadn't called. My father hadn't texted. Not even my brother Henry, who usually stayed above the drama. I had never felt more invisible to them. And yet, to everyone else, I was becoming visible. That contradiction sat heavy in my chest. At home, Jess greeted me with open arms and a bottle of Prosecco. "To Shoreditch royalty," she declared. I raised my glass, but my smile was slow to follow. "I should be happy, right? You should be ecstatic." But I wasn't. Not fully. Because I hadn't shared it with the people I once thought would be proudest. And maybe because I'd started to build walls, not just from wood, but around my own heart. Every day that passed, I grew more distant. Not just from them, but from feelings. I smiled for customers. I answered emails with cheer. I posted funny captions. But at night, when the lights were off and the sawdust settled, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, numb. Jess noticed. Of course she did. "You haven't laughed in weeks," she said gently one night. "Not really. I'm tired." "You're shielding yourself." I looked away. "I don't have time for meltdowns. This is working. It has to keep working. You can build an empire and still feel things, Clara." I wanted to believe her. but feelings had betrayed me before, made me vulnerable to voices louder than my own. So instead, I buried myself in logistics, production, packaging, scaling. I rejected every phone call with a Surrey area code. I skipped my mother's birthday. I ignored an invitation to my cousin's wedding. I told myself I didn't need closure or validation or reconciliation. I had revenue projections, growth charts, and still, in the middle of a booming showroom, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. That night, I opened my Instagram inbox. Buried between furniture questions and spam offers was a message from a customer who had bought one of my early handmade desks. It read, "I bought your Waverly desk last year after my divorce. Just wanted you to know my daughter does her homework on it every night. Thank you for making something solid when everything in my life felt breakable." I stared at the message for a long time, and something deep inside my chest cracked softly. Not grief, not pride, something older. Recognition, maybe, that I was building more than furniture, that even if my family never saw it, I was seen. The morning the LUK feature went live, Jess burst into my room waving her phone like it was a golden ticket. "Clara, you need to see this, you're in L. I blinked, still tangled in a blanket and last night's exhaustion. The L. Yes, and not just a sidebar, a full profile with photos and adjectives like visionary. She shoved the screen into my hands. There it was, my name in glossy serif, nestled between interviews with sustainable fashion icons and articles on healing after heartbreak. The woman reshaping British furniture with soul. Below that, a photo of me, hands dusted in sawdust, crouched beside my Easton table. The article praised my tactile aesthetic, my refusal to mass produce, my refusal to conform. It called my story a blueprint for millennial independence. I should have felt euphoric. Instead, I just felt heavy. Later that day, my inbox became a war zone of opportunity. A retail chain in Germany asked about licensing my pieces. A celebrity lifestyle blogger reposted my bar stools with the caption, "Want, need, manifesting." A London design agency asked if I'd keynote a panel. Even my own website crashed for a full hour due to traffic. Jess poured Prosecco into teacups again. "This is it," she said. "This is everything we worked for." I nodded, smiled, numb. That night, as I tried to reply to every email and field every inquiry, I noticed it again, my hands, trembling ever so slightly, as if they remembered something my mind was too proud to acknowledge. Fatigue, real body-deep burnout. But how could I stop? I had orders pending, clients waiting, new followers expecting brilliance. The world had finally decided I was worth noticing, and I couldn't afford to let it turn away. So I doubled down. I worked 14-hour days, drank caffeine instead of meals, stared at sketches until my vision blurred. I ignored the voice in my head whispering, "You're unraveling." And I certainly didn't tell Jess how sometimes, when I tried to sleep, my heart raced as if someone had rung a fire alarm inside my chest. I just kept building, kept posting, kept going. Because what was the alternative? Letting them say, "I told you so." My father once said that passion without profit was just play acting. I couldn't bear the thought of proving him right. And yet, beneath the accolades and hashtags, I started to lose touch with myself. I found myself reading comments just to feel something. I scheduled photo shoots for days I knew I'd be too tired to show up fully, then smiled anyway because that's what successful women do, right? Eventually, Jess cornered me. "You're not okay." "I'm busy." "No, Clara, you're breaking." I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked mid-joke. She didn't flinch. "You used to talk about your work like it was breathing. Now it feels like it's choking you." I didn't answer. Couldn't, because deep down I knew she was right. Success had given me legitimacy, but it had also given me shackles, expectations I couldn't keep up with, loneliness I didn't know how to name, and a kind of exhaustion that made even the softest pillow feel like concrete. One night, sitting alone in my studio surrounded by the very furniture that had made me famous, I whispered into the silence, "I thought this would heal me." The silence didn't respond, but somewhere outside, a fox howled into the London night, and for the first time I wondered, what would happen if I couldn't keep building? We sat at a rooftop cafe in Dalston, the air tinged with citrus from someone's cocktail and the hum of city life winding down. Jess had dragged me there. She said I needed sunlight, real food, and perspective. I hadn't argued, mostly because I didn't have the strength. My hands were tucked in my lap, clenched tight to stop the tremors. My eyes stung from another night of no sleep. I stirred my ginger tea 3 times without sipping. Jess finally said it, the thing I hadn't admitted to myself yet. "You're burning out." I didn't deny it, didn't joke or shrug or hide. I just exhaled. "My hands shake when I pick up a chisel," I whispered. Jess blinked. "Clara, I dropped a plane last week, just dropped it, couldn't grip it, and I couldn't finish the commission for that boutique in Notting Hill." I lied and said the timber cracked. She reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. "I can't stop," I said, my voice trembling now too. "If I stop, it all unravels, the clients, the momentum, the illusion." Jess tilted her head. "Illusion. That I know what I'm doing, that I'm okay, that I'm winning." The sun had started to dip, painting the sky in cotton candy hues. All around us, people toasted drinks and laughed and planned weekends. Meanwhile, I couldn't feel my fingertips without focusing. I felt like I was watching my life from the outside, through soundproof glass. "I thought once I proved myself, once I made it on my own, everything would feel lighter," I continued. "Like I'd finally outrun them, outrun what they did when they shut the door in my face." Jess was quiet for a moment. "You didn't run," she said. "You built something from rubble, but it's okay if you can't carry it all alone anymore." I nodded, but I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know how to let anyone help. My parents had made love conditional. If you disappointed them, love was revoked. Support vanished. So I built walls. I mistook self-preservation for independence. And now I didn't know how to rest without guilt. Later that night, back in the flat, I stared at my unfinished order board. 17 items, each with a deadline, each one custom. I turned off the light and stood in the dark for a long time. No chiseling, no sketching. Just the quiet buzz of the fridge and my own ragged breath. I was so tired. And still, beneath the fatigue, the engine kept running. Because if I slowed down, what if the world forgot me? What if the silence reminded me of how empty that train platform felt? What if they were right all along? Jess poked her head into the studio. "Come to bed, just for tonight." I nodded, and this time I actually followed. As I curled under the duvet, she whispered from her doorway, "You're not failing, you're just human." I clung to that word like a lifeline. Human, not a brand, not a business, just Clara. A woman trying to heal through oak and pine, trying to turn rejection into beauty, and tonight allowing herself to rest. The first letter came on a Tuesday. Thick envelope. No return address. Just my name in stark black ink. At first I thought it was an invitation, maybe another magazine or a partnership pitch. But when I opened it, the words hit like a brick. "To whom it may concern. Your recent products are in direct violation of registered design patents owned by Hollow and Hart Interiors, filed under copyright registration 29274D. Continued distribution may result in legal action." I read it 3 times, then once more slower because my chest was tightening. Design infringement. I'd never even heard of Hollow and Hart. I always drafted from scratch, tested prototypes, even archived my sketches with timestamps. This had to be a mistake, but it didn't feel like one. 2 days later, another letter arrived, this time with more legal jargon. Allegations of imitation design elements, vague contract violations, and something about proprietary motifs. The word motif had never felt so sinister. I called the number listed twice, but it went straight to voicemail. By the end of the week, I received a third envelope, this one from a solicitor firm in Mayfair. The language was colder, more final. "Cease production of the Easton series. Remove related imagery from all online platforms. Provide immediate disclosure of sales revenue pertaining to disputed items." I sat on the kitchen floor, the letter in my lap, my laptop blinking with unfulfilled orders. I didn't cry. I didn't breathe either. Jess walked in, took one look at me, and didn't even ask. Just knelt beside me and said, "Tell me what they're trying to take." "My future," I croaked. We stayed there for a while, the floor tiles cool beneath us, her hand on my shoulder like an anchor. "I can't afford a lawyer," I said finally. "Not a real one." "Then we find one who believes in you." I shook my head. "They're calling me a thief, Jess. They're accusing me of stealing my own work." She tilted my chin up gently. "You know the truth, and you're not alone." I wanted to believe her, but fear was a shapeshifter. It twisted every win into a liability, every design into potential evidence against me. I began second-guessing every line, every cut. Were my table legs too similar to someone else's? Was my joinery too familiar? What if inspiration itself was a trap? I stopped posting, stopped replying to DMs. Orders slowed, not from lack of interest, but because I was too paralyzed to ship. My body forgot how to eat. I drank coffee out of habit, but meals felt indulgent. My skin grew dull. My joints ached from tension. I felt hunted, like someone had decided that my success was too loud, that a girl who walked away from family money and dared to thrive was ripe for destruction. One night, Jess found me in the studio, again, just sitting. Not working, not drawing, just sitting. There's something else, I admitted. She paused. Tell me. I had a nightmare that I walked into court and my father was there, watching, smiling. Jess didn't dismiss it. She didn't rush to reassure me. She just said, okay, then we fight, and if we're going to fight, you need sleep, you need food, and you need a damn solicitor. I can't afford. I already emailed your brother. I froze. Henry, she nodded. He's a barrister, Clara. He loves you. And I'm sorry, but pride isn't a strategy. My throat burned. I hadn't spoken to Henry in nearly a year. He lived in Sydney, a world away from all this. He won't come, I whispered. Jess looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. He booked a flight already, lands in 48 hours. And just like that, the floor didn't feel quite so cold. Because even when the world tries to erase your work, someone still believes you built it. Henry arrived with jet lag under his eyes and a briefcase full of legal firepower. It had been almost a year since I'd seen him, since the day our father handed me an ultimatum and Henry, safely tucked away in Sydney, promised to stay neutral. I hadn't blamed him. We'd both grown up knowing neutrality was his armor. But now, standing in our flat like he'd never left London, he wrapped me in a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long to be casual. You didn't deserve any of this, he said quietly. And just like that, the wall I'd built cracked. He spent the next 48 hours combing through everything, my sketches, invoices, timestamps, contracts, messages. He printed out copies, highlighted discrepancies, mapped it all like a battlefield. Jess called it barrister brain mode. I called it salvation. This claim is vague, he muttered on day 2, flipping through the cease and desist again. Almost intentionally so. Wording allows for intimidation, not litigation. And this competitor, Hollow and Hart, they're known for knockoffs themselves. You're a threat, Clara, that's what this is. I watched him over the rim of my tea mug. But threats can win lawsuits if they have more money. He didn't answer right away. Then, not this time, we're not letting them scare you silent. We set up shop in my tiny studio. Jess managed logistics, emails, client outreach, updates. Henry worked pro bono like it was personal now. I think maybe it was. And for a few days, it felt like the tide was shifting until it didn't. We were reviewing files late one night when Henry stopped cold. His eyes locked on one of my design folders, a shared Google Drive I used with past assistants to catalog iterations. This file, he said. Did you share it with anyone else? No, I replied automatically. Only me, and wait, yes, 2 assistants, Jenna last year and Leo before her, but Leo left suddenly. Didn't even say goodbye. Henry's lips pressed into a thin line. Look at the metadata. I leaned over his shoulder. One file had been downloaded 5 weeks ago from an IP in Notting Hill. Leo lives in Notting Hill, I whispered. We stared at the screen and everything fell into place, the overlapping motifs, the timing. The way Hollow and Hart's new designs looked suspiciously familiar. They hadn't coincidentally mirrored my style, they'd bought it. From someone I had mentored, trained, paid generously, trusted. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, because betrayal hits differently when you gave someone a chance, when you believed they believed in you. Henry clicked through, screenshotting everything, building our case. But all I could do was sit there, stunned, while the pieces rearranged themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. Lee, who I once treated like a little brother in the shop, who I stayed late to coach through his first joint, had sold me out. He sold me out. Jess stood in the doorway, eyes wide, reading the tension. What happened? Henry spoke first. We have proof. One of her ex-assistants leaked the designs for payment. I couldn't answer, my jaw locked, my chest hollowed. All I could see was Leo laughing over coffee in my studio, asking if I believed in second chances. I did. That was the problem. Later that night, I locked the studio door and stayed inside for hours. Didn't talk, didn't respond to texts. Just sat there with my unfinished prototypes and unanswered questions. The lawsuit suddenly felt unwinnable. My energy was gone. My body stiff from months of tension. My hope brittle. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. It was theft of my time, my heart, my nights of dreaming into paper and oak. Jess knocked. Henry called. I ignored them both because I didn't want to be comforted. I wanted to scream. But even that felt like a luxury. So I did what I always did, sat still. In the quiet, in the pain, and let the weight of betrayal settle over me like dust. The sun hadn't even risen when I unlocked the studio. Sleep hadn't come, not even in pieces. The betrayal sat like concrete in my chest, too dense for tears. I hadn't touched my chisels in days, hadn't drawn since we discovered Leo's leak. Jess and Henry had both tried, gently, to coax me out of hiding. I hadn't budged. Until now. The light inside was soft, almost reverent. Every tool sat exactly where I left it, neat, untouched. And still I hesitated. Because the last time I'd worked here, I wasn't afraid. But now I was afraid to trust, afraid to care, afraid that every idea could be stolen, every effort undone by someone pretending to admire it. I moved slowly, one drawer at a time, unfolding sketchbooks, examining rough drafts, tracing old pencil lines with the tip of my finger like they belonged to someone else. And then I found it. The very first design I ever made is grit and grain. A stool. Simple, raw, unpolished. I remembered sanding it in my parents' garage, blaring Fleetwood Mac to drown out my father's voice echoing from the kitchen. "You're wasting your time, Clara." I sat on the floor, cross-legged, holding that design in my lap. Not to mourn, but to remember. Because no one could copyright this feeling, this fight, this faith. I stood up, slowly, taped the sketch to the wall, then taped another and another. Every design I'd ever drafted, early ones, flawed ones, the misfits I had hidden away for not being marketable. I pinned them all to the studio wall like armor. Then I started writing. Not just notes, but timelines, origins, documentation, sources of inspiration, development iterations, supplier receipts. The whole creative process laid bare. If I was going to fight Hollow and Heart, I'd do it with the truth in all its grain and grit. 2 hours later, Jess arrived with coffee. She paused in the doorway, stunned. "What is all this?" "My evidence," I said, not turning around. "My story." Henry showed up an hour after her, still buttoning his coat. When he saw the wall, he nodded once. "Good, this is good. You've got provenance, you've got dates. This isn't just a defense, it's a manifesto." We spent the next several days in what Jess called war room mode. I documented every design, wrote affidavits, contacted previous clients who had commissioned bespoke work, and asked if they'd testify to my originality. They said yes. Every single one. Jess handled the outreach, Henry filed the motions. We even tracked down an old supplier who confirmed that Leo had requested files for inspiration under my name weeks after he'd officially left. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. We were building a case, a real one. But more importantly, we were reclaiming mine. Each new witness, each signed statement, each photo of a smiling client using my work, stitched something back together in me. Trust, not in others, in myself. And somewhere amid the clatter of keyboards and printer ink and courtroom prep, I picked up a chisel again. At first, I couldn't even hold it steady. But I didn't stop. Because I had already survived the worst rejection a person can face. Not from strangers, from family. And if I could come back from that, I could come back from anything. The tribunal met in a sterile room above a Covent Garden law office. Pale walls, gray carpet, polite tea service, civilized on the outside, combative at its core. Henry wore his usual armor, navy suit, tie knotted like a challenge. I wore black slacks, and the linen shirt Jess insisted made me look unshakable. But I didn't feel unshakable until I looked at the wall of files behind Henry. My sketches, my receipts, my process, the physical proof of every late night and trembling hand. They tried to break me with intimidation. Instead, they gave me a reason to rise. Across the room sat Hollow and Heart's lead counsel, a man with impeccable posture and a face that never cracked. Their client, a woman named Sienna Hart, barely looked at me. She scrolled her phone during our opening statement. When the tribunal chair asked if I had a defense, Henry stood. "We have more than a defense. We have a record of origin, verified by timestamps, witnesses, and signed testimonies of commissioned clients." One by one, we laid it out. The designs, dates, drafts, and every digital breadcrumb from concept to creation. The process. How my sourcing worked, the handmade joinery choices that couldn't be replicated by a machine or mimicked without context. The witnesses, 5 former clients, 2 suppliers, and an expert in design copyright who confirmed my originality. By the end of the first day, Hollow and Heart had gone from smug silence to desperate objections. Their claim unraveled like cheap veneer. Then came the twist Henry had saved for last. A signed affidavit from a former intern at Hollow and Heart. The intern had seen my leaked designs on Sienna's laptop, along with a thread of internal emails referencing the Monroe mimic. Their defense collapsed on the spot. Day 3, the tribunal ruled. The claimant has failed to provide adequate evidence of infringement. Ms. Monroe's body of work is found to be original and independently developed. The tribunal grants in favor of the defendant and awards damages in the amount of £2.4 million for loss of income, reputational harm, and legal costs. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just breathed. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because I knew exactly where that money was going. 3 months later, Grit and Grain launched its first flagship studio in Soho, an open-concept space with skylights, a public showroom, and a maker's archive where guests could trace every design back to its first sketch. We went global. I hired a team, rolled out limited edition pieces, collector runs, custom commissions for design houses in Tokyo, Berlin, and LA. At 27, Forbes listed me among the top young entrepreneurs in design. I was worth £24 million. But none of it mattered more than this. I had reclaimed the narrative, not just legally, emotionally. I had proven to myself more than anyone that I wasn't lucky. I wasn't just talented. I was relentless. The kind of relentless that doesn't come from ego. It comes from being told, "You're nothing without us," and choosing to become everything without them. And still, through it all, I hadn't heard from my parents. Until the morning of my BBC interview. My phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen since Surrey. And just like that, the past came knocking. The text read, "We need to talk, Dad." It arrived minutes after my BBC interview aired, a profile segment on Britain's rising creatives that showed my studio, my team, my work. My name flashed on screen with titles like founder, designer, CEO. I stared at the message for a long time. Not congratulations, not "we're proud of you." Just a vague summons, like nothing had happened. I didn't reply, but 3 days later they came anyway. My assistant buzzed through from the front desk of the Soho studio. "There's a couple here asking for you, older, say they're your parents." I closed my laptop slowly. My hand hovered over the intercom button. "Send them up," I said. It wasn't forgiveness, it was curiosity. When the elevator doors opened, there they were, Elaine and Victor Monroe, still immaculately dressed, still impossibly certain. "Clara," my mother breathed, stepping forward like this was a reunion. "Look at this place, it's stunning." My father offered a brief nod, no apology in his eyes, just calculation. "We saw the segment," he said. "Congratulations." It didn't land. The words were too late and too empty. "What do you want?" I asked. My mother hesitated, my father didn't. "Our firm is in trouble," he said. "Client loss, reputation hits. Your brother tells me your name carries weight now. We thought perhaps you might be willing to invest." There it was, not an olive branch, a handout. I nearly laughed. "You kicked me out during a storm," I said quietly. "Told me my dream was a fantasy, and now you want me to rescue the empire you once weaponized against me." "We were trying to protect you," my mother said, soft but firm. "It was never personal." "It was entirely personal," I replied. My father cleared his throat. "It was business, and now we're here to discuss business." "Then here's my answer, no." I watched the flicker behind his eyes, first disbelief, then disdain. "Clara, don't be short-sighted. This isn't about pride." "No," I said, standing tall, voice calm. "It's about power, and I no longer owe you any." My mother looked away. My father's jaw tightened. "This firm is your legacy too," he tried one last time. "No, my legacy is in that showroom. My legacy is in every woman who sees what I built and believes she can do it too, without permission." The silence stretched, thick with everything we hadn't said in years. Finally, my father gave a stiff nod. "I see. Then we'll be in touch." I let them walk out without another word. 2 weeks later, I didn't call them. I called my broker. And I made an offer to purchase a controlling interest in the Monroe Audit Group, quietly, strategically, legally. The board voted within a month. The firm had been bleeding too long. The vote was unanimous. Victor Monroe was out. When I walked into that boardroom for the first time, every head turned. My father sat at the far end, pale and still. I took the chair opposite him. "This firm was built on hierarchy," I began, "and fear, that ends today." He didn't speak, so I continued. "As of now, I'm CEO, and I won't be running it like you did. I'll be auditing the culture you left behind, starting with the people you overlooked." A pause, then I looked directly at him. "And for the record, I'm not here to save your legacy. I'm here to rewire it." He swallowed hard. Then quietly he said, "I was wrong." I stood, and for the first time he stood after me. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Clara Monroe named youngest CEO in Monroe Audit Group's history. Below the headline was a photo from the boardroom, me standing with the skyline behind me, my father just barely visible in the corner. The caption read like poetry, from founder to frontrunner. The interview requests doubled overnight. Some wanted a quote on female leadership. Others wanted the juicy backstory, how the heiress who walked away came back to take the throne. None of them got it, because the truth wasn't glossy. It was scarred, and I was done editing myself for palatability. I spent the first 2 weeks as CEO quietly, observing, listening, understanding the machinery my father had built. What I found was what I'd always suspected. Control without compassion, efficiency without soul. Numbers ruled. People came second. That changed immediately. I created mentorship programs for young analysts, especially women. We restructured departments to encourage collaboration, not hierarchy. I rewrote the culture deck to include words like integrity, empathy, autonomy. Some resisted, but most, especially the ones who'd been silenced for years, rose up in gratitude. The board called it radical. I called it necessary. And quietly I began funneling portions of my settlement into a foundation, the Grit Fund, a grant for women-led startups in design, architecture, and artisanal manufacturing. Every piece of furniture I sold from the flagship showroom carried a percentage toward it. If I was going to rise, I'd bring others with me. Then, one evening after a panel at the Design Museum, I found an envelope slipped into my bag. No return address. Just a familiar loopy script. I watched the broadcast, "I'm sorry, Mum." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't respond either, because some things don't get a second arc. My mother had chosen silence when it mattered most. And silence, too, has consequences. But later that week, I received a parcel at the showroom. Inside, a faded photograph. Me at age 7, holding a wooden toy I'd carved with a plastic butter knife, smiling like I'd invented fire. Taped to the back was a note from Henry. "You've been this girl all along. I'm just glad the world finally sees her too." That one made me cry. On my 28th birthday, Jess hosted a rooftop dinner under string lights with long wooden tables. Mine, of course. Friends filled every seat. Henry flew in from Sydney. My studio team toasted with Prosecco and carrot cake. We danced barefoot to Fleetwood Mac, and I realized I had built something far more valuable than a company. I had built belonging. After everyone left, I stood alone on the rooftop, city buzzing beneath me. I thought back to the girl on the train platform. Rain-soaked, suitcase heavy, rejected and alone. I whispered something to her into the night sky. "You were right to walk away, because walking away isn't weakness. It's the beginning of choosing yourself, and choosing yourself is how empires rise." Have you ever had to walk away from the people who raised you in order to become who you were meant to be? If this story spoke to something in your heart, let me know in the comments. And if you're building your own legacy, one brick at a time, hit like and subscribe. Because we're not waiting for permission anymore. We're making our own blueprints, and we're building them with grit.